gentlemen, welcome back to Overcaffeinated and Dysfunctional. We are your hosts. I'm David.
I'm Josh.
Make sure to give us a follow on Spotify, YouTube, X, and TikTok. Click the link tree in the description below for all the links to our social media. Be sure to like and subscribe for all new episodes. Welcome back to episode 2. Today we break down a large, heated, and controversial topic. Josh, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the policies of immigration and immigration reform, as well as ICE.
But before we start that conversation, we are going to introduce a new segment of our podcast called In the Hot Seat. During this segment, we will answer one of our viewers' questions. Each host will have 60 seconds to answer the question. Today we're going to start off our segment with a viewer from Spotify. The viewer's name is Pork Dog, and he asks, what do you think about sanctuary cities like Boston and Mayor Wu? Do you agree with her? Josh, your time starts now.
Well, I don't agree with her on the aspect of being a sanctuary city, and there's a few reasons for that. But the primary reason is you're holding in criminals. Under U.S. Code 8, subsection 1325, improper entry by an alien, it is illegal to elude for the purpose of coming into this country. Now, the other part of it, the money that is spent on these people coming in, going to non-citizens. For example, Denver Mayor Mike Johnson admitted to Congress $79 million spent there. Chicago Mayor 1%, which is about $635 million. New York City Mayor Eric Adams estimated $6.9 billion on these illegal immigrants. It's not fair, it's not just, and it does not help our people in this country, which should be the first and foremost priority.
Well, Josh, that was a great answer to the first question we've had, and now I'm going to give you my opinion. Let me know when my time starts.
And your time starts now.
What do I think about sanctuary cities? Well, sanctuary cities, historically, looking at statistics, they harbor criminals. So what is a sanctuary city? Sanctuary city is a city that does not cooperate with ICE, do not report to ICE. So therefore, you're hiding criminals. When it goes to Mayor Wu, she isn't tough on crime. She's not tough on crime. She has a list of crimes that she won't even prosecute in the city of Boston. And that should speak volumes in itself. And that's where I stand on sanctuary cities and Michelle Wu. And we will touch more on sanctuary cities during our conversation.
Nice job. You cut out 30 seconds on your time.
Oh, look at that. Almost like I knew what I was going to say.
I did too. It's just I'm long-winded.
All right, here we go. Let's start the conversation with a definition, shall we? So the definition of illegal immigration refers to the act of a person entering or remaining within a country without legal right or authorization to do so, often involving entering without inspection at a port of entry or overstaying a valid visa. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a correct definition. I'm just going to revert back to U.S. Code, Title 8, Chapter 12, Subchapter 2, Subcode 1325, the improper entry by an illegal alien, or by an alien. And I'll read this out loud so you can get a description of what the U.S. government sees that as. Any alien who, 1, enters or attempts to enter the United States at any time or place other than as designated by immigration officers, or 2, eludes examination or inspection by immigration officers, or 3, attempts to enter or obtain entry to the United States by willfully false or misleading representation or the willful concealment of material fact shall for the first commission of any offense be fined under Title 18 or imprisoned. So therefore, just by crossing the border, whether it's the U.S. Canadian, U.S. Mexican, if you are going through the border and not seeing immigration services like you would see at an airport or when you come through a port of entry, that is illegal and a violation of U.S. code.
Yeah, no, I agree there. And and when you think of the risks of illegal immigration, coming across the border illegally, this opens up people to many humanitarian concerns, especially for their safety. If you look at, most cases coming across the southern border, coming in from Mexico, most people crossing the border are being I wouldn't say trafficked, but they're being brought over by cartel coyotes. And what does that mean for these people? Well, it means that they're paying thousands of dollars for these people to get them across the border. And they're also being subject to a lot of violence. A lot of violence. I mean, you're talking about sexual assault, beatings. You know, we don't know exactly what these people are going through, right? 100%. But this is what majority of the claims of people coming across the border, a southern border from a coyote, have said. And a lot of other risks coming into the country legally is these coyotes are making these people carry drugs over the border for them as part of their payment. Now, if they don't pay the money or bring the drugs across that they want, you know, what do you think the consequences of not doing what they say or paying up is, Josh?
Well, not only that, I've seen reports come out from coyotes talking about after they get you to the US border, they'll ask you for more money afterwards.
Right, and if you don't pay up, well, guess what? They know who your family are in Mexico. So not only are you at risk of being trafficked for all this money, or being sexually assaulted, or physically assaulted, emotional damages. If you don't pay up more, you know, when they get you across and they say, "Hey, you owe me another $5,000," and you say, "I don't think so," guess where they're going? They're going to knock on your family's door.
Well, not only that, they might take your life as well.
That is true. That's true. And, you know, a lot of other concerns of when they get here, you know, people in America, they exploit these people. The average illegal immigrant in the States is making well below the annual wage, well below the hourly wage. They're not getting any, you know, benefits like health insurance or paid time off. That doesn't exist for these people, you know, and that's a huge problem in itself. These people aren't able to, you know, afford, and it's not everybody, but a majority of the people coming across the southern border that are working for cash under the table aren't making enough to survive.
No, and then you start involving in immigration enforcement in there, and they're not going after the people that aren't doing anything illegal. They're going after the people that are committing crimes in the United States. Just look at I can't remember her name right now, Blake and Riley, actually, in Georgia. She was brutally raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant that should have never been here in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, she had her skull smashed in with rocks. Wasn't that part of that investigation there? Where she was
I don't
sexually
physically
assaulted,
remember
sexually
that part.
assaulted. I think she was sexually assaulted. For the people who don't know, I believe she was sexually assaulted under a bridge and got her head cracked in with a good-sized rock. Now, I think before we go any further, I think we need to explain our position on immigration and where we stand. So, Josh, if you want to take the lead here and give us your opinion, and then I'll give you mine, and then the conversation will just flow from there.
Yeah, I mean, my position on immigration is I believe immigration is a good thing. The US as a whole has been a melting pot for so many different cultures. It's good. It's what makes the United States the United States. But we have to have legal immigration. And the way I justify this is if you go look back at, I'm going to use a left-leaning president because I am right-leaning, so I don't want people just thinking you're just talking from the right side politics. This is actually a left president, President Bill Clinton, at the State of the Union in 1996. He goes on, let me be very clear about this. We are a nation of immigrants. We should be proud of it. We should honor every legal immigrant here working hard to become a citizen. But we are also a nation of laws. And I agree with that sentiment. We are a nation of laws. I am for legal immigration, but I don't want overflowing illegals coming through the southern or northern borders. We need to know who's coming into this country, why they're here. Do they have any connections to terrorists? Do they have a connection to the drug cartel? We need to know these things before we let these people into our country.
Well said, well said. So my opinion on immigration, and I kind of concede. I'm kind of in the middle on this. Yes, our country, we do need defined borders. We need defined borders for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons is to protect our citizens. You know, the people in the States. We pay our taxes and we pay all these extra taxes. You know, we pay. Just think about it. You make a check, it gets taxed. You buy something, it gets taxed. You buy a house, that gets taxed. You buy a car, that gets taxed. So you're overly taxed, and part of that is having law enforcement, you know, federal agencies and state agencies protect you. With illegal immigration, that makes it very harder for your environment to be safer. And I understand that it's not everybody coming across the border is a criminal. Not everyone coming across the border, is here to have a negative impact on society. Majority of people coming across, I would say, are, looking for a better life, looking for a better job to be able to support their family. But we do need to do this the right way. And again, I believe that the immigration system is broken and it needs reform. And we'll talk about that in a little while, about what I think should be reformed and, what I think shouldn't. But at the end of the day, you need laws to keep our country safe. We need to know who's coming across the border. And we need to know who is who. Who is
So
who?
do you think a president, and I'll use President Trump right now because he's the current sitting president, do you think he has the authority to shut down the border and should continue to have the authority to enforce immigration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said before, without enforcing border policies or controlling who's coming across the border, not even just the southern border, the northern border, the east coast, the west coast, every border of the United States, it is important to know who's coming across the border, especially in a day like today where terrorism is giant. People are coming into our country that are on the terrorist watch list. There's people coming into the country who are a threat to our national security. And yes, I believe Trump is 100% within his right of protecting the border. Every border, not just the southern border.
Now, I'm going to read something from the way that our founders wrote about immigration when they formed this country, and it's called The Consent and the Right to Immigrate. And I'm actually going to refer to a very old document in our favorite state of Massachusetts. The 1780 Massachusetts Constitution holds that the bodily polite is informed by a voluntary association of individuals. It is a social compact. The formation of political society is thus predicted on the assent of those who will compose the society. So if we dive deeper into the language of the Massachusetts Constitution, they're basically saying, hey, yes, we need immigration, but it has to be a two-party consent. The U.S. has to agree with it, aka the people, because we are a nation governed by and for the people with consent of the people. And then the other party needs to be consenting.
Yeah, no, I do agree there. I do agree. What is your thoughts on the way past, present, and future presidents keep our border safe, or quote unquote shut down the border?
I think part of it is we need to look back at the 14th Amendment. So for our listeners and anybody else listening to this, the 14th Amendment wasn't ratified until 1890-ish. It actually was not formulated under the original Constitution for a plethora of reasons, which is what the founders had actually stated. You can't have birthright citizenship, not for illegal immigrants. And there's a reason I say this. The birthright citizenship only entices pregnant women to come across and walk from El Salvador, Guatemala, Venezuela. These are long, treacherous walks. Why are we letting them do this? If they come into the country pregnant, I say within a certain time frame of their pregnancy and have the child here, they're still a citizen of Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala. Now, if they have an asylum case, that plays into the role differently. But I believe if just because you're a foreigner, you have a kid here, the kid should follow the citizenship of which the parent is. And that's kind of how we follow it here in the United States. Before the 15th Amendment, it followed the person, the parents of which you were born of. And this was actually stated in a Supreme Court case, Kim Wong-Ark versus the U.S. He was born here. I believe he was Singaporean descent, left, came back, and the U.S. said, you're not a citizen of this country. And he went to the Supreme Court saying, I was born here. And that's the original movement of the 14th Amendment. He shouldn't have been allowed back.
So what do you think? So in the case what you said of a woman getting pregnant, coming across the southern border, having a child, what do you think about in the case where a mother has been here for 15 years and has started a life here and gets pregnant? Her husband, they get pregnant, they have a baby in America. What do you think about a situation like that, where they've come into America, started a life, all they know is America now at this point? They don't know anything else. They don't know, they started their life here. What do you think about that?
That's a difficult topic in itself, especially when you go back and look at, is the father a US citizen already? If the father is, then yes, the baby is. If the father isn't, it's still a tough question. I believe once you have, maybe make it an expedited time where when you find out you're pregnant and you're going to have to go to a hospital and risk being deported, make an expedited visa where the person could do like a parole in place. So the president has the authority to enact parole in place. You could do something like that while they're under the visa program, getting moved across at an expedited way. They still have to go through the background check. They still have to go through everything because at the end of the day, it also depends on, you could be a good person, but how many times have you been arrested? You know, whether you were just wrong place, wrong time, you could argue that in court. But I believe that should be brought to light so that way you can argue it in court. You know, if you have a felony for aggravated assault, you need to justify how that happened, why it happened, and is it going to happen again in front of a US court, and let the court make the decision. So I would, it would be a difficult process, but it could be reformed and put in.
And I think when we talk about illegal immigration, there's many ways to become an illegal immigrant, quote unquote illegal immigrant. One way is you come into the country across the border, not at a port of entry, right? So you cross the border, whether you quote unquote jump the border or you walk across, you swim across, you boat across, coming into the country not at a port of entry, right? So that's one way. Another way we see illegal immigration is people coming into the country with visas and overstaying their visa. Now, I think when we're breaking this down into whether or not birthright citizenship should be a thing for these people, I think we need to look at the fact of how they became an illegal immigrant. Did they come into the country illegally by crossing the border illegally? Or did their status become an illegal immigrant because they've overstayed their visa? Now, and me and Josh, we talked about this a little bit off the record yesterday about this, and this brings us back to reform, right? When we talk about reforming the immigration system, both sides of the aisle are going to admit, and everyone has said this, the immigration system in America is broken. It's broken. You apply for a visa, you may or may not get it. You apply for asylum, that can take years. You apply for a green card, that takes even longer. So where do we start with reform? Well, I'm glad, Josh, you were thinking that. I've read it through your brain. I seen it on your forehead. So I'm going to start off with that one. I think where our immigration system needs reform is we need to close, quote unquote, close down the border, right? We need to control who's coming across the border. And the reason we need to do that is we need to be able to vet who's coming across and understand what their intentions are and understand, why they want to come to America. Are you fleeing political violence? Are you fleeing domestic violence? Are you fleeing just for a better life? Why are you coming to America? And when you look at deportations, I think we need to look at it as a basis, like I said before, how has your status of a legal immigrant, how did you get the status? Did you come across illegally? Or did you have good intentions and you came into America legally with a visa and then happened to overstay your visa? I think the act of coming across the border without anything, right? Coming across the border without anything versus coming into the border on a visa and overstaying, I think that shows two different attitudes on the approach of this. And I think the overstaying of the visa should have a little bit more leniency than someone who come across the border the wrong way. Coming to the country the wrong way.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. We've talked, like you said, we talked about this kind of off the record. So when it comes to the two, I'm going to start putting them in as two different parties. On one hand, you've got the illegal that illegally crossed the border, and then you've got the illegal side of it where you let your documents expire. The documents that expire, I should definitely think there should be more leniency there too. If you're within 3 to 6 months of your documents expiring, you pay a small fine, somewhere in the range of like $50 to $150. Wait a week. As long as there's nothing nefarious, you get your visa updated. Outside of that time frame, you take on a heftier fine do the same process. And if they find something, you might have to go to court. And maybe we make that a priority, anyways. When you're late on a ticket for a car, and I know two different comparisons there because one has more volatility to it, you have to go to court to explain everything. So maybe we make that part of the process, anyways. If you're 6 months and over or a year late on your documents, you'll have to go to court and explain it in front of a judge. Why did you miss it? Well, I didn't have the funds to reapply. Okay, well, why didn't you talk to us about that? Well, I had to shut this off. I had to shut this off. We'll take everything into account and make sure, again, there's nothing nefarious. If there's nothing wrong, you can get your visa back reinstated. Now, how else we go from there, it's a bigger discussion. I mean, we can spiderweb this any way we want to when we talk about it. So,
Yeah, I definitely do agree with you there. Just to say again, and I'm not sure. I mean, you may have touched on this. I kind of zoned out for a second there, but when you're looking at people who've overstayed their visa, and most people who overstay the visa aren't being caught unless they've committed a crime. Most people who've come into America illegally, period, they're either, to be caught, you either have to be doing something you shouldn't have been doing, committing a crime, a felony. In that case, yeah, you're being seeked out, or you were in the wrong spot at the wrong time with somebody who was being looked for with a felony, or,
I mean, even Tom Homan said this.
Yeah, he said if you're in the country, if you're in the country legally and you're not doing the wrong thing, we don't know you're here. How are we gonna find you? Now, yeah, I mean, some people that were here illegally may have got caught up in the mix. I'm not gonna say that didn't happen. It probably has. Like Josh, like we just said, when you break it down by deportation, I think we should be looking at, okay, you came here legally with the visa, you overstayed your visa. It's been 10 years that you've been in the country. You've started a family. I would say after 5 to 10 years, you tend to forget what back home in your home country was. And I would say it should be looked at more leniency. If you've been here for 10 years, overstayed your visa, you've been here for 10 years, you've committed no crime, you've been a productive member of society, and you're kind of just living life like every other American, we should give these people a pathway to green card or a pathway to citizenship. And
I would agree with that statement. It's not, as long as they haven't committed any felonies, you go back through their record. Like I said, you check everything, make sure they haven't been doing anything nefarious, pay a fine, give them a visa for a week, and then tell them, hey, here's the paperwork for your green card. If you submit it within 30 days, we'll put it on an expedited process.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then when you get to and there's also situations where, like, your mom brought you here when you were like 5, right? And you have an older sibling where the older sibling gets married, and, based off the way the federal law is, say I'm the father, I have 2 kids, if my oldest child gets married to a legal citizen, they automatically have pathway to citizenship. Now, through that child, they're able to extend a green card or even citizenship to their parents. Now, how about in the situation where the youngest child has now turned 18, is now over that, they're no longer a minor. Now that parent is no longer to extend, that green card or pathway to citizenship to their youngest child that is now a legal adult. I think we need to be able to extend, or try to at least be able to extend that pathway to green card or citizenship to immediate family. Brothers, sisters, mom, dad. I mean, we don't have to start going aunt, uncle, grandparents, this. We don't have to go that far. But immediate family. People who would live in your house, mom, dad, kids. Be able to extend it to them. For situations like people have been here their whole life. They came here when they were a child. They don't remember anything about their country. Everything they know is America. And now everyone in the household is illegal, either on a green card or on a citizenship, and they have no legal basis and no way to become a citizen until they get married.
I agree. I would have to I would have to agree on that. They would just, now that they're an adult, they would have to go through the same extensive background check. But yeah, it would still be the same thing.
No,
That
I agree.
offer should be able to go out, even if they're not living in the United States.
No, I
If you have
agree.
a family here, your sister who's here, but your brother's in Spain, if you get married here and he's looking to move from Spain or wherever to the US, that option of green card should be offered out to that person. But again, they have to go through the extensive background check.
No, I agree, and I think we should prioritize people currently in America. People
Yes.
that are currently here. That's who we should prioritize. And I mean, when what are you gonna do? You're gonna deport an 18-year-old kid. He's practically still a child, right? Just graduated high school, 18 years old, practically still a child, no criminal record, nothing. You're gonna deport him to a country that he hasn't been to since he was 3 years old to live life on the street. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't even know. Most children in America, whether you're illegal or you're a born citizen, they don't even know how to file their own taxes. Never mind go live in a country they don't know by themselves.
I believe there should be a way to apply while you're in the country. One, serves as a dual purpose. I mean, we know you're in the country at that point, but then also you can start working on your papers here. You don't have to sit in an illegal status and then worry about your life the entire time. As long as you ain't doing nothing wrong, you're acting right, you're acting within the laws, you're a good person, you'll fly right through the immigration paperwork
Yeah,
based off of that, prioritizing people in America first.
and like I want our viewers to know as well is like we believe that we need borders. We definitely need borders, and we need to be able to enforce the borders. But for people who have been here for 5 to 10 years and they know is America, and especially if they haven't committed crimes, we need to be able to form a way to mold these people into productive members of society. And again, we need to be able to defend our borders and protect our borders to stop violent terrorists, criminals, from coming across and causing hell in our countries and our states.
So, in your opinion, where would we start these policies? What would be, I guess, the first locations where we would start these policies? Where would we tell these people to go to in order to start filing for these programs?
Well, I think this is a bigger discussion to be had, but I think the first place we look at, I would say, would be sanctuary cities. Let's go where we know the population is higher. For instance, I'm not saying there's no immigration population in states like Texas or New Hampshire that aren't sanctuary cities, but the bigger population of illegal persons populations are in these sanctuary cities. Now, I believe sanctuary cities are dangerous. They're dangerous. Why? Because they protect criminals. They protect criminals under the laws. Minus sanctuary cities, if you are an upstanding citizen, you're an illegal person, you came in the country legally, and you haven't committed crimes, there's no reason you need sanctuary. Unless you're committing crimes or you're with somebody who has committed a crime, there's no way for them to know who you are. There's no way. So, where do we start? I think we need to start looking at the interior of sanctuary cities. We need to say, if you're here illegally and you want a pathway to a green card or a pathway to citizenship, let's make an online portal where people can log in. They can log in there, upload all their information, and we go from there. And again, another thing we need to look at is crime history back in their country, right? Have they committed what we would consider a felony here in their country? Have they done things or been part of organizations that have impacted our country negatively? We don't want somebody who works with the Mexican cartel to be living in Texas on the border or Arizona on the border. That would be against what we're trying to do here. So I would say we open an online portal. We have people upload all their documents from their homeland. And if they don't have those documents, we work with them to try to, prove who they are. We do extensive background searches. And I say we start from there. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say we start with the sanctuary cities. I mean, first off, Just look at the financial burden they put on the sanctuary cities. I'm counting right now a grand total of 4 sanctuary cities with a collective burden of $8.3 billion spent to house and give benefits to these illegal immigrants. And some of them are violent offenders. A lot of them are. So we're willing to spend 8.3 billion on illegal immigrants inside of sanctuary cities, but we're not willing to put that money elsewhere where it needs to be, whether it's reforming national policy or for places greatly like Chicago. Chicago has spent roughly, and this is an estimated number off of his response of 1% of the city's budget, $630 million on giving these people services that they didn't earn. They don't pay taxes. That is your tax money going to them just for free. That 630 million could go to, let's put 1,000 more officers on the street to stop the gang violence. That 630 million can go to veterans. For most people out there, they don't know veterans commit suicide at a rate of 22 a day. Why aren't we doing more for veteran services inside of our cities? Why does it seem like these sanctuary cities care more about the illegal immigrants coming into this country than their own constituents? Now, on the national side, New York City received $80 million from FEMA. That money could have gone, and this was in 2023, to natural disasters and or reforming our policy. Instead of doing short-term fixes or short-term ideological fixes, let's do an actual fix and pass a bill in Congress like it was meant to. If we plan on reforming this, it's going to take action of Congress, not acts of momentary, here's some money.
No, I agree. When we look at the numbers of how much money was spent on sanctuary cities, on housing these people and supporting them, and I want to remember something that was going on in these sanctuary cities while we were housing these people. They were using these shelters as a base for criminal organizations. They were using this as a base for criminal activity, whether it was drug smuggling or whatnot. And in the meantime, we have a total of 653,000 homeless American citizens. And 57,000 of these people are living outside in cars, tents. 6,500 people living in emergency shelters. 35,000 of these people have put their life on the line to defend this country, have given everything they could to defend this country, and they're left with mental trauma, physical disabilities, and living on the streets. And I just want to let people know that 28% of the homeless population are children under the age of 18.
So why aren't we using this money in cities to actually build places and build these people up? What would be your thought? Why would they be more captivated on spending this money on illegal immigrants that don't really... They have the potential to improve society but aren't currently improving society?
Well, it all comes down to the political agenda, is what it comes down to. It comes down to what's going to get them the votes at the ballot box. That's what it comes down to. And why aren't we giving these people that are here illegally? Everyone deserves a due process, right? Everyone deserves their day in court. So why don't we allow these people to temporarily work while they're waiting for their turn in front of the judge? Why are we bringing these people into court for their first hearing and saying, you could stay in the country, here's a GPS, you can't work, you can't do nothing? That's not productive. That's resorting people to turn to violence, resorting for people for slinging drugs or robbing people. And I believe that leads to more violence in these cities. So maybe while we're waiting for our time, due process and our day in court in front of a judge, we allow these people temporary work permits. We allow them to go out and find a job. Whether it's, obviously they can't be cops, and I've seen that, Boston political leaders in Maine. I know they did this in Maine too. They had a guy, no legal status in the country, and they trained him to be a police officer, went in and bought a firearm. Well, guess what? You're a prohibited person under federal law. So why don't we allow these people to work these jobs? And again, we need immigration to help boost the economy. There is jobs that we need to fill, whether it's in agriculture. We need more doctors, more nurses, more lawyers. We're not anti-immigration. We're pro do it the right way.
So my only concern on that part, and I'm going to refer out to California for this, is California has issued 4 CDLs out to illegal immigrants who couldn't speak English, couldn't read road signs, and out of these 4, I actually just saw it come up the other day. Can't remember the family's name. They got into an accident because they took a head-on collision from this illegal immigrant, and now their kid has cerebral palsy, a TBI, can't move, has to get fed through a GI tube. Then there was this other guy, same place, driving in Florida, completely did a U-turn over a median, killed a family of 3 or 4. Why are we giving these people these such high jobs, so a CDL driver or a cop, when they're prohibited to do so for anybody else? You know, if I walked into a CDL office and I couldn't read road signs, they tell me go kick rocks. Why are
No, I agree there. I agree. The same and this is where we're gonna go back and we're gonna go into DEI now. Is the same standard needs to be set across the board. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter what country you originated from. We need to look at people for their qualifications,
their merit?
their merit. Why are we defining people by the color of their skin and not the personal characteristics of their personal character? And that's the problem. That's the biggest problem we have in this country, is people are still defining people based off color of skin, nationality, and where they come from. If you come into this country illegally and you're waiting for your day in court, it might take years to get that day in court. Why shouldn't we put you into the workforce and allow you to take care of yourself? Pay your way until you get your day in court. But we need to make sure that you are still held to the same standard as every other American. Now,
I don't get a leg up just because you're waiting in process.
And I agree, and I would say not all, but some conservatives will say, these people are taking our jobs. I disagree with that factor because there's 5.3 million Americans in the United States that are unemployed. 5.3 million. What do you think about that?
So when we start getting into employment gets us into a windy road. So I agree they should be allowed to be employed. But I do agree DEI needs to go away. And it's not a radical right policy. There is no reason to have DEI. It should be right off of merit. I shouldn't have to evaluate or take my business into consideration based on I employ 50 people, 10% of that have to be another ethnicity. Just go by the best person for the job.
Right. And that goes back to people's qualifications and their personal character and not the color of their skin or where they come from.
Yeah. And then once you get into employment standards across the US, 5.3 million people are unemployed. That also goes back to the fact we're a welfare state now. We're a welfare state. We're an admin state. We're a military state. Military warfare. You'll hear a bunch of different names for this country. Welfare, warfare state. It's crazy. But the biggest point I'm making here is welfare. Welfare is expanded completely beyond the scope of what our founders thought of. If you go back, the federal government used to have welfare. Now, it was a very, very basic setup. It was, okay, you couldn't make enough to survive. You're going to live in this federal housing. You have to work this many hours a week. You have to prove that you're working these hours, and you can stay here. Now, you can just live off welfare, and it's perfectly fine. And that's part of Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society bill, which we can make another video on that because I've got so many qualms with that bill. So many qualms. For example, I'll just put this out there, that there was a list of cities when Lyndon B. Johnson signed this bill that were supposed to be considered the model cities. These are the cities we are going to model the rest of the country off of. Guess what one of those cities was, David? Detroit. So right now, do you think we should model the rest of the country off Detroit?
Absolutely. Why not? Why not? Why not? That's where we're headed. That's where we're headed.
So when you talk about people being unemployed and taking our jobs, it's a twofold answer because I believe we need to get people off of welfare and start making requirements for welfare. and then you'll start seeing the employment numbers start to drop more. And I can tell you right now, for an area I live in, we have $550 billion coming into this area over the next 5 years. There's going to be plenty of work. We need more people, and immigration will help with that. It just has to be the right form of immigration.
No, I agree. When we have, we have billionaires. We have billionaires in other countries that are investing into our country right now. And I think America is, I think we're going on the right side of history, and I think the country is going to the right place. But we need Americans to get off these social programs. These social programs were made for when someone had a downfall, right? You have a life, you have a family, and maybe you lose your job. Maybe you get fired, something, or maybe the business went out of, they went out of business. These programs were made to help you get back up on your feet, not a way of life. And in America today, we have 43 million people that are collecting food stamps. 43 million.
Mm-hmm.
How many of these, and we will never know the answer to this question, but how many of these 43 million people are eligible to work? How many of these 43 million people are eligible to work 40 hours a week and have the capability of working 40 hours a week? Most of these people live better than the rest of us on a full-time paycheck. They get this free money from taxpayers that we pay for. Taxpayers pay for that. It's not free. When these people say, "Oh, just collect food stamps, it's free," it's not free. It's not free. You and I are paying for that. The taxpayers of America are paying for that. It's not
the government subsidizes reliance on the government. And I'll take this from one of the words of the people that helped form the Great Society Bill. He is quoted saying, "We, the government, will take the place of God. We will supply everything for human need and fill that void that they feel God is not there." No, the government can't be God. There is only one God. The government is here to be governed by the consented. So, that kind of ties back into our last episode where we talk about governance by consent. We need to take that right back and start telling them what actually needs to happen in this country, not just subsidize people just because they rely on the government.
And that's when people need to realize this country is for the people, by the people. There's no dictators in this country. The people up on Capitol Hill, these people in D.C., yeah, they're put there to represent us. They're not there to run the country the way they seem fit. They're there to represent the voice of their constituents, the voice of the people. So if you don't agree with what's going on or how your representatives are representing you, reach out to them. Call their office, send them emails, flood their offices with emails and text messages or calls. A lot of them take text now. And going back to the reform, we talked about reform a little while ago. The immigration system is broken and it needs reform. If you're in, say you're in, I don't know, let's use Canada for an instance. Everyone always resorts to southern, Mexico. Let's resort to Canada. If you're a Canadian citizen looking to attain a citizenship in America, why does it take 10 years to be heard? That's a problem in itself, and that is what fuels illegal immigration. You can ask yourself, what fuels illegal immigration? Yeah, we understand violence, political stuff, and looking for a better life. Yeah, that fuels it. But what fuels it even more than that? The long waits, the long processing of paperwork. Why does it take 10 years? And again, we got to vet people. I'm not saying just click the approve button on every application. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there needs to be a better way. Do I have the answer to that question? No. We could talk for years about how to reform the immigration system. I think the first start is the wait times. That's the biggest thing, and I think that's fueling people coming across illegally.
So since we're talking about immigration and that's such a hot button topic inside this country lately, I want to see what your opinion is of ICE. Not only that, but the recent violence towards ICE. So there's been a couple cases, and more recently, you've got Portland, Oregon going off now again. You've got the Dallas, Texas shooting that happened towards ICE. And not only that, the doxing that's going on directed at ICE, and now California's law, which actually just got overturned by the DOJ, stating that ICE officers could no longer wear masks inside of California. So what's your opinions on all this stuff? What's your thoughts?
All right, going back to what we talked about in our last episode, a lot of the violence that is being directed towards immigration officials, ICE, is coming from the rhetoric from the politicians. A lot of this stuff that you're being heard of is being spewed by our politicians. Rhetoric. That's causing these violence. You gotta remember that these are just people like you and I. You know, instead of choosing to become a baker, become a doctor, become a lawyer, they decided to become a federal law enforcement officer. It just so happens that they enforce immigration law. I 100% believe that yes, they should be allowed to be wearing masks to protect their identity. Why? Because the politicians, they're spewing hatred and making it so these people's lives are in danger. Not just the officer, but their family. Why should an officer's wife be threatened, or people showing up to her house threatening to kill them or threatening to burn down their house because their husband or his wife is enforcing federal law? And the doxing of ICE agents, people that are doxing these federal agents and putting their identities out there, I believe they should be looked at largely and possibly brought up on charges for that. I mean, we're not talking about, yeah, you know the baker down the road, she hides behind the curtain every day? Yeah, her name's Betty. No, we're talking about people are shooting at these people. Their kid down in Dallas, Texas last week, he was firing on top of a roof with bullets that were engraved or written on anti-ICE, shooting at a van coming in with illegal immigrants, coming into the facility. This is what is going on when we spew the rhetoric, or we try to think of a good way to put it, or we continue to say the wrong things to people. It fuels their ideologies to do bad things.
Yeah, it doesn't help. We're calling them the Gestapo or the federal SS. That rhetoric definitely does not help in that circumstance. And then doxing ICE members, that's like doxing our military. I view that very, very poorly, and I think they should be brought up on charges for it. And I'm glad the DOJ stepped in and told Gavin Newsom, hey, get back in your lane. You're a state governor. You're not a federal lawmaker. Get back in your lane. Because it isn't his job to tell ICE what they can and can't do. He's a governor of a state. You can tell your state authorities what to do. You can't tell federal to do what you want federal to do. You aren't the president of the United States. So,
yeah,
and then,
another way to look at it, are we going to send U.S. intelligence spies to other countries like China or Russia and then call them and say, hey, this guy's a spy, here's where he's living, here's his address? You ain't going to do that. Why are we doing that domestically?
It's poor. That's all I can say about it. It's instead of trying to get these people hurt and inciting violence against people, vote, get out and vote. That is your chance to change what this country looks like. Do I necessarily agree with the opinions of the people that are doing this stuff? Absolutely, wholeheartedly not. Now, I believe ICE is doing their job. They're picking up the illegal aliens or immigrants that should not be in this country. And as we spoke of earlier on this, was the people that they're picking up, they're on their radar for a reason, because they're a criminal. They're not going to go find your grandmother who's sitting at home making baked goods for, her family breakfast. And there's grandmas out there wielding a knife killing people. They ain't going to know she's here.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And like I said in the beginning of the episode here, I'm not saying that innocent people don't get caught up in this. They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And you know what? At the end of the day, if you came across that border illegally, you put this on yourself. Now, like we said earlier, when you're deporting these people or you're picking them up to be heard for deportation, we should be looking at how they came into the country illegally. Whether did you come across the border or did you overstay the visa? That should play a big role in how you're treated when you are picked up.
Absolutely.
But like you said earlier, the doxing of agents is highly uncalled for, and any political representative or any government official who decides they're going to put agents' lives on the line by putting their identity out there for lunatics, and I call them lunatics because they're lunatics. If you're going to go and commit violence on another person because of their views, you're a lunatic. You're a lunatic. People, we have the freedom of speech in this country. People have died for this right to give us the freedom of speech. And because you don't agree with somebody, you're going to go take their life. Or because they're just doing their job. If we made pizza illegal in this country and we had people going around enforcing people not, calling out people who were making pizzas, you're not going to go kill them because you don't agree with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. So what do you agree with what Trump's doing now in regards to Portland, because Portland, Oregon had the same violence. Didn't involve shootings, but it involved becoming a riot and the need for pepper balling. Trump came out this morning and said, at the request of Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem, I am directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. I am authorizing full force if necessary. Thank you for your attention in this matter. So I've got a few questions that kind of develops out of this. Would you consider Antifa a domestic terrorist organization? What kind of force should we expect to see coming from National Guard members? And then do you think it'll help quell the tensions in the area?
Okay, so let's start with the Antifa question. So what do I think on Antifa? I think an organization who commits violence on our societies, our towns, our cities, our states, anyone who commits act of violence, whether it's physical violence, the burning of our buildings, the burning of our businesses, I think, yeah, they should be dealt with. And they should be dealt with pretty damn quickly. Now, I know Trump has designated them as a terrorist organization, and that's what it seems like they are. If you look at all the headlines in the news, there's nothing ever good about Antifa. If you look at the documentaries that are out there on Antifa, these people are radicalized. They're radicalized against the right-wing agenda. They're radicals. And I'm not saying there's not right-wing radicals. There absolutely is a right-wing radicals. I think once you become radicalized, you put yourself in a whole different category than right-wing or left-wing. And I agree. If you're causing terror on these cities and states, you should be designated as so. I agree. Now, when it comes to Trump sending the National Guard in to protect federal property, he does have the right under federal law to do that. He has the right to protect federal agents. I think their presence will deter some crime. Will it deter all crime? I don't think so. And, if he does enact the Insurrection Act like we talked about in the prior episode, if you haven't watched that yet, go over and watch our first episode, then yes, they have the right to police the communities. Other presidents have done the same thing during riots, during the race riots, and again, we talked about all that in our first episode, so I won't go deep into that. But if President Trump federalizes the National Guard under the Insurrection Act to protect these cities against riots, against violence, against a domestic terrorist organization that they designated Antifa, yeah, under federal law, he has the right to do that. He has an obligation to protect the citizens of his country. Is it infringing the rights of the state? If the state is not willing to say, hey, we can't control this, we need help, then I think the federal government should overstep on that. And it's not over. What was that?
Or if they're not enforcing law and order.
That too. And it's not. And at that point, you're not infringing on their rights. You gave them the opportunity to try to deal with it themselves. They proved they could not. I would say if you can't get it under control within 24 hours, the federal government should step in under the Insurrection Act. What are your thoughts there, Josh?
So I'm 100% for classifying Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. It opens up a lot of avenues that the president can now use at his disposal without violating U.S. law. Sending the National Guard, I believe, will help protect the federal buildings and federal agencies. As far as turning down the temp, I don't think it is. I don't think it will turn down the temp. Unfortunately, people seem right now to take it as, well, now we just need to act with more violence. And unfortunately, I think this is going to be a prerogative for a little while longer. We might see this continue for the next 6, 8, maybe even a year. I want to see what the tactics are, and I know those won't be released as far as that goes, but I would love to be in the room seeing what they're planning out.
Like to be a fly on the wall, that's how they say it.
Yeah.
Now, and I agree that protesting something you don't agree with is 100% your right as an American citizen. It is your right.
Yes, but it has to be civil.
You have the right to peacefully protest. Now let's break this down. What is a peaceful protest? Marches and rallies, sit-ins, boycotts, symbolic displays, civil disobedience, monologues, having conversations. But let's look at the acts of Antifa historically. The burning of cities, burning of businesses, the looting of businesses. We can go on and on and on. If you are radicalized to the point where you need to destroy businesses, loot businesses, and destroy what people have worked every day of their life for, you're radicalized and you're no longer peacefully protesting.
No, once you cross the threshold of throwing Molotov cocktails, burning buildings, even setting a dumpster on fire, it doesn't matter. You've crossed the threshold from a civil disobedience and a civil protest to now a criminal protest, aka and or insurrection, not surrection, sorry. So that changes up the rules a little bit. And I think it should. We've had people in this country who have peacefully had discord, whether it was with the administration, each other, and nothing would not come of it. Nothing would happen. That's the way we used to do things in this country. So you could go out, march the streets with a sign, and it might influence policy. But nobody was also there going, oh, we're going to sit there. I'm going to go burn that congressman's car while we're marching here. For some reason or another, people think it's okay now to destroy stuff that's no longer theirs. Or go out and just be reckless and ruthless, putting their own lives and lives of other people at risk. There is no reason for it whatsoever.
No, and like I said, I do agree with that. And the biggest problem in today's society is the rhetoric, and we touched on that a lot in the first episode, so we're not going to go into that. But let's look at some statistics. The left-wing mob says the right wing is racist because they want to deport people, send people back. And again, we touched on our opinions. We're not going to keep going there and repeating ourselves. But let's look at some statistics here. Trump in his first term deported 1.1 million people. That sounds like a lot, right? Bush, 2 million. The commander of deportations, Obama, in his 8 years in office, commander in deportation, deported 3 times the amount of people that Trump's deported in his first term. And we don't have the statistics so far this year because it hasn't come out yet. 3 times the amount.
I would like to mention that, you look at attacks on ICE previous and attacks on ICE now. There is this uptick of somewhere between, the results aren't 100% yet, between 400% and 1100% increase on attacks on ICE. 78 assaults in the last 8 months. And then I just don't get why we have to resort to violence. Why are we going back to the barbarianism of the old?
Well, the biggest difference between the Obama administration and now is the rhetoric. The rhetoric that we are seeing today was not the case during the Obama administration. And you got to remember during the Obama administration, I mean, I was a child then. I was young back then. We both were, but you heard in the news every day about children in cages. We still didn't see what we're seeing today when they reported on children in cages. And I don't want to hear about family separation. If I'm a father and I commit a crime, even as minor as shoplifting, and I go to jail, I'm being separated from my family. I don't want to hear child separation. It is the worst excuse for anything I've ever heard of in my entire life. Family separation.
Obama started family separation.
And I will say, yes, I understand. How about this? When you go to this and you say family separation, your family would have never been separated if you didn't break the law. Families in America, American citizens every day in America are separated when they break the law. And I agree. And like we stated before, not everybody, most people that come into this country illegally or overstay the visas aren't here to cause issues or aren't here to destroy the country. They're here to better themselves, to better their family, and to support themselves. And I'll say it one more time, and I won't say it again after this. The people who come across the border, come into the country illegally from other than a port of entry, should be sent back. If you've come and you've overstayed your visa, I 100% believe we should give you a pathway to citizenship. Now, if you came here on a visa, overstayed a visa, you got 3 DUIs, you've sexually assaulted somebody, and you've robbed 3 banks, and you've looted 6 stores, absolutely you should be sent back. But if you've come into the country, you've been an upstanding person, you've supported your family, you've lived under the radar, and all you know is America, you deserve a pathway to citizenship.
No, and I completely concur with that. There has to be set regulation and standards on who we allow and who we don't allow in each one. Now, with that, I mean, unless you've got other things to add, I would say we should be able to close this out. What do you think, David? You have
Yeah,
anything else to add?
I don't think I have anything else to add. And again, we encourage all views and we encourage people to comment their opinions below. And we would like, everyone should be able to speak their mind and what they believe and not have violence acted upon them. And I think our country is going in the wrong direction in that sense. In the sense where you are unable to speak your mind on what you believe in fear of being, I'll be censor friendly, unalived, or having your family targeted. I mean, look in the sense of Tom Homan. And I understand a lot of people don't agree with the deportations. Him and his wife live separate. They don't even live under the same roof because of all the threats that he sees. This is America, land of the free. We should not be living in this society like this, and society should not be acting like this. And the politics in DC or local politics in local offices need to do better with spilling hateful rhetoric. You got anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I completely agree. Yeah, that's it for me. I mean, you kind of touched all the bases right there. And I would just say thank you guys for joining us on the Overcaffeinated and Dysfunctional podcast. Don't forget to leave us a like and a comment. We'll leave a link to all of our socials in the description below. Thank you guys.
Peace.